Okay, so welcome to T&A Government Podcast. My name's Alicia.
And I'm Trevin.
And we are here with a special guest,
Kaitlyn Cooney.
And today, has anyone heard about the Miranda versus Arizona?
I listened to a podcast last week about it.
So, Kaitlyn, do you know what Miranda versus Arizona is?
Inform me, I have no idea.
Okay, so there is this guy, his name is Ernesto Miranda. At a young age, he was sent to Arizona State School for Boys because he chose this big life of crime. And he went to a military and spent majority of it in confinement, solitary confinement. He was in the military for 18 months, and at least 1/3 of that he spent in solitary confinement. And, you know, it's, like, kind of difficult to get kicked out of military,
I don't think I've ever heard of someone getting kicked out of the military or anything.
Dishonorable discharge, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ernesto.
Yeah, he managed to do that, I guess.
Yeah. It doesn't. It wasn't really known what he did.
Yeah.
But he was a pretty bad guy.
I did hear he stole cars or broke into cars when he was younger.
Yeah, like Grand Theft Auto
Dang.
Yeah, and he got into a lot of fights in school, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so he was honorably discharged at the age of 21. Then he met this woman in California who was 29. Her name is Twyla, and she has 3 children, and she wanted to get a divorce with her original husband, but she couldn't because, you know, money is a whole thing, and they didn't have enough money for that. But they ended up just, moving in together, and they ended up getting pregnant, and they had a kid named Cleopatra, and then they moved back to Arizona.
Name.
I know, right?
What a
name. Yeah.
I'm guessing it was a girl.
Yeah. So he kind of shaped up, and he
wasn't he doing better, and then he just decided to go back to his old ways and
he ended up getting a job as a dock worker. So we're gonna kind of fast forward here. There was this woman, her name was Jane Doe, and she was mentally delayed. And she was walking home one night from a...
was it her job?
Yeah, she was walking home from the movie theater that she worked at. She was walking to the bus stop, actually. And a guy in a car pulls up, squealing tires. He puts his hand over her mouth and says, "Don't scream and you won't get hurt," and ties her up and puts her in a car. He ended up driving her for 20 minutes outside the city. He ended up assaulting her in very bad ways. And he ended up raping her. He was, weird enough, he was really upset afterwards.
Yeah.
He was upset.
I feel like once he did it, he realized how much he messed up and how bad, actually what happened.
Yeah, but he ended up telling her, he said, "I don't care if you tell your mother, it's none of my business.
Just pray for me."
Yeah, just pray for me.
Well, yeah, he did a pretty messed up thing, I'd say.
Yeah, but it's so weird to hear someone upset after raping someone and saying, "Pray for me."
I don't...
But after that, he ended up driving her back into the city, asked her where she lived, and dropped her off 4 blocks from her house.
I think that's crazy.
Yeah, he drove her back. Yeah, he drove her back.
And he dropped her off about 4 blocks away from her house.
Yeah, and when I heard that, I was in utter shock. I was like, "You kidding me? What?" Okay. But she walked into her house hysterical, and you know, she's mentally delayed, so she's not
blame her.
Yeah, but also she's mentally delayed, so when she walked in hysterical, she's not the most verbal person.
She can't communicate
how
I heard that she barely talked to her she said not more than 30 words to her stepbrother, and they've known each other for I think, was it 2 years? 2 years or longer.
Yeah.
And she was so excited just to be there with them and be with her family.
Yeah. But she ended up opening up to her sister and told her the whole story. Her sister was mad. I
could imagine.
Yeah, she was feeling all the emotions.
Didn't her sister's husband, or was it the stepbrother that went out and tried to find the car?
It was the stepbrother, the brother-in-law.
The brother-in-law.
So, the sister called the police, and the police they interviewed Jane, and she gave a description down to the weight, like eye color, hair color, skin tone. Yeah, the only thing that she couldn't get down was the ethnicity. She even got it down to the weight. She knew the weight and the height.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah, but the only thing that she didn't know was the ethnicity. She didn't know if he was, mixed or any of that.
Was he wearing like a mask or something?
No, it was just really dark. She wasn't. They basically were just like, okay, that's fine. Thank you for giving us the information. So they went about doing their whole investigation, and in the meantime, her brother-in-law would drive her to the bus stop every day, watch her get on and off of the bus stop, make sure that she got on safe.
And as he was doing that one day, he noticed a green car that would always just sit there with the lights off.
Yeah.
And he got a glimpse of his license plate, and it was like
DFL.
DFL.
So the green car was like driving by, and he was like, oh, that's the same color that Jane said it looked like. So he ended up getting the main 3 letters, which is DFL. And he took it to the police and told them all about it. And so they did an investigation on the car. They went into the police database, and
back then they had to go through all license plates without any technology.
Yeah,
they had to go through papers.
It was a lengthy.
Yeah, it was I bet that's a while.
It was crazy, but they finally narrowed it down to a few people, and then they did some more looking into and narrowed it down to Twyla, Ernesto's girlfriend.
And didn't they live like close to each other, or?
Yeah, they realized Ernesto fit the description, and they interrogated him. But they brought Jane Doe in to identify him, and she just couldn't, because being someone who is mentally delayed, it's kind of overwhelming, difficult, overstimulated.
I feel like it'd be difficult for anyone after experiencing that sort of trauma.
But traumatic.
Yeah, but even more so, it's significantly difficult for Jane.
Yeah.
So they ended up just interrogating him. And after a long investigation, like they were going through the whole process, like trying to get him to crack, and he finally did.
Honestly, didn't he just confess to himself and?
Yeah, he confessed. Then the police. This part threw me backwards.
It was very weird because I don't know why they did this in the first place.
They brought Jane in and asked if she was the woman he raped.
What?
They brought Jane into the interrogation room where Ernesto was and said, "Is this the woman that you raped?"
What?
Why would you put a girl through that?
Why would you do that?
I don't even know. When I was hearing about this and reading all about it, I was like, okay, hold on. You first off don't bring a victim into the interrogation room, because that's just traumatizing in itself, plus the additional trauma that you have from the situation.
Yeah, it's very...
It was messed
up. Very confusing and very messed up.
But he said yes. He was like, yes, I raped her. He confessed. He ended up writing his confession and signed it, right? Mm-hmm. As you're supposed to do. And,
I didn't know you were supposed to write.
Yeah, you have to...
I didn't know, I didn't
it's
know
like
you were supposed to write.
Yeah, documentation. They have you write a,
kind of like a form? Or...
Yeah. You also have to have, like, a verbal confession as well.
I didn't...
Which is why they, like, press the tape and stuff in
Fair
the
enough,
investigation room.
Oh.
So it's liable in court. So he was trialed as a sexual offender, as he should.
Yeah,
But they go to court, and the judges convicted him, along with the jury, of course, because the jury is the main deciders. They'll take their poll and say yes or no. So after they had he had this really weird lawyer.
Yeah, didn't he
He kind of.
Didn't he go back on trial to try and
Yeah, they did. They tried to do an appeal.
Yeah, an appeal. That's what.
Saying Jane Doe didn't do anything to resist him. They were
I mean, she's mentally disabled.
So she probably didn't know what was going on.
She probably couldn't even comprehend what was happening to her.
Yeah.
You know.
But they were like, "Oh, Jane didn't do anything to resist him," and they were saying, "Was it really rape if she didn't resist?" And everyone's losing their minds over this. Yes, it's actually rape, you know? And they're like, well, she didn't resist. Well, of course she didn't resist. She was mentally delayed. What do you want them to do? And she has documented stuff that says she's mentally delayed. Yeah. So it's, again, like Kaitlyn said, it's something that's hard for people to process if they have that kind of problem. So that was a whole thing. And how can you accuse someone of if someone says that they were raped, and they did a rape kit too.
Really?
Yeah, they did this whole test, and it came back that, she was raped. But they were trying to say, if she didn't resist him, was it really rape?
Yes, I mean, it was.
It was rape. But that was a very weird thing. Also, tying into the fact that they brought her into the investigation room, and then we're like, it wasn't really rape if you didn't resist him. Of course, she doesn't understand what's going on. She's like, I was touched by this man, and I didn't want to be touched.
I still feel like I don't know why they brought her in there.
Yeah.
I mean, he kidnapped her.
Yeah. He threatened her.
Yeah.
Do you think a reason why she also didn't try and resist is because he said if you
Yeah, the threat.
Yeah, the threat.
If you scream, or if you don't scream, you won't get hurt.
Yeah. So maybe that's what that's another thing that was going on in her head. Just don't move. Just.
A lot of people, when they do get raped, kind of have to they're like, okay, if I don't resist, this will just be a thing, and then I can leave and I won't die, and I'll blah 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 blah. There's a whole thing going through people's heads, but I don't think she understood exactly what was happening. But they granted his appeal.
What?
They granted his appeal, and they go to the Supreme Court. So they were questioning if his
rights were violated.
Yeah, they were like, did you read did you read Ernesto Miranda his constitutional rights? And they're like, I don't think his confession was voluntary. And there was this whole thing that they went through, and they were like, oh no, his confession wasn't voluntary. He wasn't read his rights. And, the whole, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or do can be used against you in the court of law. If you do not have an attorney, you are appointed to one. And they originally did not give him an attorney, which I can see where that can cause a problem because he didn't have an attorney.
Yeah.
But they didn't appoint him an attorney.
I don't know why the public defender.
Yeah, it was the public defender.
I don't know why anyone would want to try and help someone in court that has raped or just the woman.
Why would you want to sit there and help somebody when you know they did something bad? You can't.
And confess to it.
He confessed to it.
Confessed to it.
But they were saying that part wasn't voluntary. They threatened him or whatever, which.
I didn't read anything about that or.
They were like, oh, it wasn't voluntary. There were threats made, blah 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 blah. And here's the thing: with a threat, you don't try to, do anything. As a police officer, you do not sit there and try to threaten somebody because it's unjust. It's unconstitutional. So, you could sit there and argue, hey, it wasn't voluntary, it wasn't constitutional. But he still raped the girl.
Yeah.
And even that, he kidnapped her. Yes, he
So
may have
that's
dropped
2
her off.
counts of.
Yeah, he may have dropped her off 4 blocks from her house, made her walk in. He still did something bad. He's a bad person.
Morally, what he did was wrong, no matter what, and you can't justify what he had done.
Yeah, there's no justifying it. So they go into the Supreme Court. His confession wasn't voluntary. That's what the judges said. They couldn't trial him because they didn't give Miranda his constitutional rights, so the case wasn't continued. The case was kind of just like dropped.
So he didn't end up going to prison?
I don't believe so, no.
Because I didn't read or anything about that.
Yeah, I don't think he was trialed for that. And I think a couple years later they were trying to trial him for it.
It says here that in October 1967, Miranda was convicted and sentenced to 20 to 30 years in prison.
Okay. So over a month later, he was stabbed to death in a bar fight.
No, that's so what is, and Miranda was paroled.
Yeah, he was paroled. He got put on parole.
In December of 1975.
Yeah.
And then
so
about a month later, he got stabbed to death in a Phoenix bar fight.
It was like...
So he was still getting into trouble.
Yeah, so he was trialed, and I think it was a couple months later, he was finally put in jail because they brought back the case again. And then he was convicted 20 to 30 years, and then he was put on parole those 20 to 30 years later.
Yeah, which is, I don't know why you would put someone on parole for not even serving 10 years.
Yeah. So they let him go on parole.
Yeah, he served 8 years or something.
Yeah,
like that.
he served about 8 years. And then he was finally released and put on parole, and then got into a bar fight and got stabbed to death. So, I mean,
I still feel like that's wrong. He definitely shouldn't have been out on parole.
He shouldn't have.
He shouldn't have had the choice.
He was registered as a sexual offender too.
Yeah.
And they didn't rule that out. They kind of just were like, oh, but his constitutional rights, which wasn't.
That shouldn't matter.
Yeah, that shouldn't matter. He did something unlawful. Rape is an unlawful thing. You can be prosecuted for that. He also, in his early ages of childhood, would steal.
Yeah.
But they didn't bring that up. They didn't rule out this dude was a bad dude. They were just like, but his rights.
Yeah, they kind of just put that
police officers
first.
didn't do anything. And I'm like, well, what about the girl that was raped? He raped her.
I don't know. That's just crazy.
Yeah. But there was there's now a thing, everyone hears it on television where it's they like the whole like police officer thing is you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say and can be used against you. They have to tell you those now because it was a whole thing back then.
Is that a reason why they say that now?
Mm-hmm.
It is. I didn't know if that's what you were talking about.
Because isn't it called the Miranda rights?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing. But the majority opinion was, he got sent to jail. People tried fighting for him, like the.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, some people tried fighting for him, which I'm like, why do you want to sit there and try and fight for him? Like, he is not a good person.
Yeah.
And the whole impact was now you have the Miranda rights, and they will, any officer will sit there and tell you your rights.
But it says the decision was 5-4 for Miranda.
5-4. Gosh, that's really close.
Yeah,
that's too close. I don't like that.
Close, yeah.
So who was the
people that backed him up?
The majority. So who was fighting for Jane?
Clark, Harlan, Stewart, and White.
Yeah, and then here. Then you have, was it Clark? No, because the majority opinion was Warren. So you have Warren, Black, Douglas, Brennan, and Fortes. Yeah, you have Warren, Black, Douglas, Brennan, and Fortes.
Oh, never mind. I got
Yeah.
you.
So they, and then you have Clark, Harlan, Stewart, and White. Those were the people who were the,
We're for.
they were for Ernesto. So it was a whole terrible situation, and I still can't believe people tried fighting for him after he raped a girl.
Yeah.
So yeah, very fun. So any other opinions that you would like to say, guys?
Not for me.
Not really.
Nope.
It's kind of just like a shocker to
Yeah.
hear
Yeah.
about the whole case.
Very.
Like, even if you sit there and listen to a podcast about it, it'll throw you back for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was listening to a podcast about it, I looked at my phone like what?
Yeah, it threw me off whenever they brought her back in to
Yeah.
ask, and then it threw me off again that someone would want to defend for
Who
a
wants?
rapist.
Like, he's a monster. Why would you want to defend somebody who, like, imagine your own daughter in that situation. Your daughter is mentally delayed and she gets raped, and people in court are not fighting for your daughter. They're sitting there trying to say, oh, constitutional rights.
I would
She
be mad.
didn't try and stop him. She let it happen, but that doesn't deny the fact that he put his hands
On her,
on
threatened
her,
her, and again, mentally delayed. So you can't really sit, like, especially with disability rights, because they still have, a voice, and
opinion.
yeah, they're their own person. So it was a very sad case to hear about, but I'm glad that he was prosecuted and convicted and put into jail, even though he was put on parole, which was not cool. Hearing this case made me want to flip a table, but yeah. So that was TNA government podcast about the Miranda versus Arizona rights.